Horizontes homstage Greeks, and this is all Bible translated and explained in 7 minutes. Bachchan redeem zoomer. Okay, Bible translation. I know that a lot of it were obviously were Latin, right? Different version of Latin, if I remember correctly, and they translated it to English, right? Uh, there is also another, translation. Multiple books were translated in different ways in English, and I guess it can make sense, right? It's always fascinated me how you can just basically, word by word translate a language, right? You need to understand the language in order to translate it because even though it might sound one way, it might not be that because in that culture, that word, the way it was spoken could be different, right? That's why a lot of dubbing movies it's problematic, right? Dubbing just feels weird, especially even with the subtitles and things like, okay, this doesn't feel right, right? A lot of Hindi movies, they just say, but there's like English subtitles, and the way English subtitle reads, I'm like, oh man, that doesn't feel right, right? So I don't know. I guess that's what he's going to explain here, like how translations are, how the way it was done, and how certain words probably don't mean the way it does or something like that. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting. Remember, we will flag my Ericsson before I subscribe, so on the way, I will do tomorrow. Check out the Ericsson, there's a link in the description, and yeah, that's it.
You might not know this, but the Bible actually wasn't written in English, nor was it written in any languages similar to English. Rather, it was written in ancient languages that can be hard to translate. There's different decisions you could make when translating the Bible, and that's why there's so many translations of the Bible. For example, some translations are more literal, which means they try to translate word for word. But just because you have the same words doesn't mean you have the same meaning behind those words, so some translations try to translate the meaning by paraphrasing the text. So
See, I knew that's what this was going because this happens a lot more than I'm surprised nobody basically talks about this a lot because when you try to transfer it into languages, it's not that easy, right? I hear that a lot. Obviously, I can speak English and also native language, two native languages. I don't know, one national language, one native language. I don't know. So obviously, whenever I see differences between them, I feel like that doesn't really feel right. Like that doesn't encompasses what it means, right? It just feels weird when you really see the translation. So obviously that would happen in Bible with the Latin and things, right? Obviously it wasn't written in English. English didn't existed then, right? So it was written in Latin, different version of it, right? Even English has went through a lot of changes, right? If you see Shakespeare in English, it feels like a bit different the way they were saying and compared to today. If you try to read it right now, right? Even how Newton was back then writing things just feels like, okay, why is he saying it like that? It just feels weird. So even English has changed over time.
the literal ones are more true to the text, whereas the paraphrases might be more true to the meaning of the text. Sometimes there's debate over how to translate a certain text, so some translations will translate it so that it fits a Christian message better, whereas others will translate it based on what secular scholars think it means. So you can graph all the translations based on how literal they are, and based on how much they try to make the text align with Christian doctrine. The King James Version is that famous old version of the Bible from 1600s England, and historically it's been the most used version of the Bible ever. It's very beautiful and poetic, partly because of all the archaic language that it uses, but this also means it can be very hard to understand in certain places. So the King James Version is probably most useful if you're writing music or poetry, and the stereotypical users of it are those independent fundamental Baptists who take the Bible so literally they think there's only one true translation of it. Now, the new King James Version tries to renovate the castle of the old King James Version by rewriting it in modern language. So it tries to keep the poetic structure and beauty of the King James Version, while also making it more understandable to modern audiences.
Guessing between different denominations, some of them are taking it very literally, some of them are like basically taking the meaning of things. So I'm guessing if there might be two denominations that think completely different of certain things based on how it was translated and how they perceive it. So if they're together, right, they would have actual fights about like what that means. Like that's insane. Two Christian, both are Christians, but both don't agree on the same text. They were just translated differently.
Another thing is that it makes a few changes to the KJV in light of modern scholarship. So it's probably most useful for pastors that are trying to lead a high church liturgy, and the stereotypical users of this are those trad guys who want to be traditional but are not actually traditional enough to understand traditional language. So the ESV, the Evangelical Standard, the English Standard Version is, well, very popular among evangelicals. This is because the translation committee for the ESV had a lot of prominent evangelical scholars and theologians. They made a study Bible to go along with it because it's a pretty literal translation, so they have a lot of notes that explain generic evangelical teachings. So this is why pastors will often recommend the ESV for their congregations to study on their own. So ESV is probably most useful for individual Bible study, and the stereotypical users of it are those Christian ladies that are obsessed with coloring and marking up and highlighting their Bibles just as much as those 20 highlighter girls from school will color their class notes. The New International Version tries to be a
I don't know, man. Seriously, that's way too much. See that? I'm all in with my book, right? Look at I colored it, everything. I took notes and everything, right? This is like something like a hobby type of thing, right? It's like extracurricular activity type of things, right? That's how they perceive it, right? Look at that. I'm at the 200 page and look at all the colors and notes I've taken.
balance
All the
between a
markers and
literal
things.
translation and a paraphrase translation. The literal ones can be a bit hard to understand in some places, but the paraphrases can make the Bible not quite sound like the Bible, so the NIV tries to be easy to understand while still sounding like the Bible. This is why it's so popular, because it's easy to understand. So it's probably most useful for a pastor preaching a sermon to a large
Paraphrasing to me also feels like a dangerous thing, right? Because it depends how much you're going to paraphrase. If you think this, obviously you're adding your own take on it, like this, what Bible must have said. At that point, like, are you becoming like a prophet or something? Like, are you really saying like what they must have felt? Because you're putting your own, you're putting your own input in it by that point, right? Like this is what they probably must have meant. That could, like, okay, maybe there could be a bit of it, like, okay, that makes sense, like most people come to that conclusion, or that could take out of context a lot and meaning would be completely different. It depends. So I guess, like, paraphrasing a bit but mostly staying true to what the Bible says is more right, I guess. From there people can paraphrase their own way, people can take things on their own way, like, this is probably what Bible meant or something. If you do it for them, that just like, okay, you can never know what the original Bible said then.
congregation, because everyone's going to be able to understand it. And the stereotypical users of this one are guys who want to read the Bible but don't have the greatest reading comprehension skills. The Christian Standard Bible also tries to have a balance between a literal and a paraphrase translation. However, the difference between this one and the NIV is the NIV uses more Christianese, more theological language, whereas the CSB tries to use more common language for people who are not as familiar with Christian terms. So the CSB is probably most useful for people that are handing out Bibles in theological language, whereas the CSB tries to use more common language for
All right, wait a minute. Blessed is the people. Bless is the blessed same as happy? Blessed, right? Even rappers use the word blessed. Why would you remove that? Right? Blessed, yeah, but happy are the people. Like that feels weird. Blessed is the people of whom this is true. Blessed is the people whose God is the Lord. Blessed doesn't directly mean happy. It can mean that, but it doesn't directly mean that. It just feels weird. Happy are the people is okay.
people who are not as familiar with Christian terms. So the CSB is probably most useful for people that are handing out Bibles in public, and the stereotypical user of this one is probably your average friendly neighborhood Baptist pastor. The NASB is a very literal translation, and the translators explicitly laid out their priorities when translating it. One of them is that it gives Jesus Christ his proper place. So that means this is a very explicitly Christian translation as well, and it's very popular among conservatives and fundamentalists for that reason. And so this is probably most useful for people who are already strong in their faith having a Bible study together or something. And the stereotypical users of this are people who treat John MacArthur like the Pope. Now, the NRSV is the complete opposite because it's a secular translation, meaning it has no Christian agenda or theology behind it. It's an updated version of the RSV, which was an updated version of the ASV, which was an updated version of the old KJV, and for each of these updates they factored in new developments in Bible scholarship. This is considered the most scholarly translation, so it's most useful for those seriously studying the Bible in an academic setting, and the stereotypical users of this one are probably liberal mainline Protestants. The New Living
That makes sense because that's a literal translation, as in like word by word. Like I said in the start of the video, could mean different things if you just translate. But if you're like a scholar who's studying this, you would know that. You would take it from there. So it's just like more raw translation than anything else.
Translation is one of those paraphrase translations that tries to be very engaging and dynamic. It's a much more free translation than something like the ESV, for example, and it tries to flow smoothly like a stream. It's most useful for a Bible study made up of Christians who are new to their faith, and the stereotypical user of this one is honestly a popular Christian bookstore salesman. The Good News translation is another one of the paraphrases, but it's specifically designed for children and those who didn't grow up speaking English, so that it can share the good news with everyone. So it avoids using any weird figures of speech or confusing language. It tries to be very straightforward without simplifying the text in any way. So it's probably most useful for people going on a mission trip around the world, and the stereotypical user of this one is a Sunday school teacher.
How many people are like that in today's world? They actually go on a mission to basically spread the Christianity or spread the good word, right? Whatever it's that is what it's called, right? Spreading the good word. Are there people like that today too, right? They basically go out, try to. I mean, obviously, like the novelist and the people like that would do it because it's that thing, right? They sell books, but just generally people like, do they actually do that? Because I don't know. In today's world, it doesn't feel like they might be doing that, right? In the past, like yeah, but in today's world, in the modern world where everything's connected, everything's on internet, I don't know. Do the people do that? Because that would be a surprise to me, because it doesn't feel like they would be doing that.
And now it's time for the message. In case you're not familiar with this one, it's got a reputation for being kinda silly. It's seen as more of a commentary than a translation anyway, especially because much of it is like this. Yes, this is actually
Look at this. Look who got picked up by God. He listened the split second I called to him. What? Complain if you must, but don't let out. Okay, how is it? What? Keep your mouth shut and let your heart do the talking. This feels like, like director's comment, like he said, like commentary, director's commentary of all the movies here, right? Damn, there's something like I'm pretty sure that's not the Bible. It's just like adding, it's just feeling it, and I guess the translating message by commentary or something.
the Bible, supposedly. The whole thing is one guy's interpretation of the Bible. It's all done by a Presbyterian minister named Eugene Peterson, and he was actually a really smart guy. So it still could be useful if you're really struggling to understand a certain passage and you want a second opinion. And the stereotypical user of this is a slightly liberal, lighthearted boomer, I guess. Now enjoy this bruh compilation of various parts of the message.
Calm your hands, all you nations, shout to God with cries of joy. Applause, everyone. Bravo! Bravissimo! What the hell? Shout God songs at the top of your lungs. I guess it kind of makes sense. Why not? They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. Look at them mean spirited, venomous, fork tongued God bashers, bullies, swaggerers. Swaggerers? Okay, where they got, okay. Insufferable windbags. Windbags, okay. This is so good. On the wicked he will rain fiery coals and burning sulfur. A scorching wind will be their lot. Fail the test and you are out. That's just what the first sentence. Out in a hail of firestones. Drinking from a canteen filled with hot desert wind. That is just like, I'm not gonna lie, that's just awesome. The way he just said, I'm bet when he wrote that down, he wanted to make it more like laughable and funny in that way, right? So people would, that's the if you can laugh at it, you'll spread it more, people will hear it more. I guess there's a meaning behind it, I'm sure, because I feel like all the words he could choose, he's deliberately choosing something that would make you laugh. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. There are corrupt, their deed are vile, there is no one who does good. Bilous and bloated, they gas, God is gone. Their word are poison gas, fall in the air. Their poison rivers and skies, thistle are their cash crop. All right, I can see how this could be, somewhat for the children, but then again, I don't know about like any negative thing. Is this like good for children? But yeah, I guess I can see how like mostly fart-related jokes sometimes it feels. There you go, the gas. This is so good.
So there's a lot of translations that could be used many ways by many different types of people. But in all of these translations, the message, no, not you, the message is the same.
Yeah, there you go. Message is like the most paraphrased and Christian message-wise, not in the center of it. CSB is the center apparently. The most literal one is ASV, right? What? ASV. Okay. I like how he makes these graphs. These graphs are always awesome.
The entire Bible is the unfolding of the story about Jesus Christ.
All right, people. There you go. All Bible translation explained in 7 minutes. Yeah. So far, this is just great. I like Redeem Zoomers basically explained in certain minutes type of videos. They're always great. I like this translation, especially the last one. That the message is just awesome. Somebody should make a video. I think Redeem Zoomer should make a video about this, just specifically just that. Just showing two translation. That was so good the last moment. Well, if you like my Rick, don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.